Ladies and gentlemen, live from Rialto, California, Mark Flores here with the Paper Review Podcast. We're going to be discussing topics such as Seth Rollins being too dangerous to work with, the Summerslam ending, and the Miz Day 141 promo. And here's your host, the man of the hour, Mark Flores. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Paper Review Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, none other than Mark Flores. You can catch me on Instagram at MarkF's Modern Life, or you could catch me on Twitter at MarkF's Podcast. Anyway, guys, I want to get several topics done out of the way as far as the Paper Review Wrestling Podcast goes. Is Seth Rollins too dangerous to work with in the ring? The ending of the Summerslam 2016. And then we also have one more topic to discuss, and that's Miz Day 141 promo. These are all current event topics dealing with Monday's Monday Night Raw, Tuesday's SmackDown Live, and we're also dealing with Saturday's SummerSlam fiasco. The second half anyway. But first and foremost, let's get the commercials out of the way. Tonight's Paper Review Wrestling Podcast is brought to you by none other than my proud sponsors, Game Swappers. Game Swappers buy, sell, and trade your retro games and next-gen consoles. That's PS4 and Xbox One. You can come into contact with Game Swappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers buy, sell, and trade. Keep in mind, guys, that there's a few announcements Game Swappers wants me to get out of the way first. First and foremost, there's going to be a retro collecting event this Sunday at the Finish Line Sports Bar and Grill in beautiful Pomona, California, at the Finish Line Sports Bar and Grill located near the Fairplex in Pomona, California, off White Avenue. It is buy, sell, and trade. You could take basically a shitload of all your retro games and buy, sell, and trade with other vendors there. There's going to be 20 plus vendors there. You could still come into contact with Game Swappers to reserve a table if you're in the interest of buy, selling, or trading and reserving yourself a space with a table. I've seen several vendors there. It's usually a very packed event with a lot of wheeling and dealing with higher end retro games, and even people just bring in retro games that they won't want to trade in, even toys, collectibles, and whatever sorts. I'm even going to bring myself two cardboard cutouts of the Star Wars Force Awakens cardboard cutouts that I really don't need. So you'll definitely see me there this Sunday. It starts from 12, the newly revised 12 o'clock time. From that to 7 p.m. there's going to be there's going to be the sports bar grill available for you as well, and there's going to be many more things available, some to announce here or there. Anyway, regardless of that, I want to let you guys know that if you do share the Retro Collecting 101 podcast or the very famous Mark and Andre Show podcast show, or even this Paper Review Wrestling Podcast where I give live news and updates on the WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and TNA. You'll be able to get 10% off towards your retro game purchases at Game Swappers, or you'll be able to get 10% more towards your retro game trade-ins. Simply take a screenshot of your share on any means of social media, and then all you have to do from that screenshot, share it, and then show the person working at Game Swappers that day, and they'll be able to get those discounts for you immediately, the day of. Anyway, guys, let's talk about the topics that we are going to discuss here. This week on Raw and SmackDown has been really crazy. We had a slew of topics that we can discuss. Mainly, first, let's get rid of SummerSlam. Let's get that nipped in the bud. The Brock Lesnar SummerSlam fiasco. As many of you guys know, there's spoilers coming ahead if you guys don't know the ending to the Brock Lesnar-Randy Orton match. During the end of the match, Brock Lesnar takes off his gloves and then starts throwing punches at Randy Orton, and then actually starts going into real combat mode and launches two elbows to his head. From what I saw in the video footage, I thought first it was a blade job, but then looking back at the footage, there is pretty much no time for Randy Orton to actually get the blade out of anywhere where he would have had it normally. because he had his head gripped on his head the whole time. I mean, he's had his hands gripped on his head the whole time. So on the second elbow, it actually launched pretty much a gash about 5 to 6 inches wide on Randy Orton's head, and he was bleeding pretty profusely from the match. Long story short, Brock Lesnar ended up causing the match to stop due to excessive bleeding on Randy Orton's part. And then Shane McMahon came in to call the rest of the match. And then Brock Lesnar ended up F5ing Shane McMahon. So that ended that on that end. But from what we have to discuss here, from what I know, is that the ending segment for SummerSlam went down as a plan. Maybe the plan went with a little less blood than they intended, but nonetheless, it ended up being a work. There's a lot of reports coming out saying that after the event, Brock Lesnar walks out and confronts Chris Jericho, who's in the gorilla position right after he comes back into the backstage, and confronts Brock Lesnar regarding this issue. Vince McMahon ends up separating the two after a heated scuffle, but Vince McMahon clarified to Chris Jericho that it indeed was a work. So that kind of clarifies some end on that. SummerSlam overall was good for its first half. The tag match, the U.S. Championship match, and then the main event all ended with silly DQs and crazy finishes. I felt that these last three matches needed to have some sort of conclusion or segue into a bigger build-up leading into another pay-per-view to their respective brands. But from what I'm seeing, they didn't do any of the sort. If all you are familiar with the tag match that ended, Big E rushed out on stage and ended up confronting the club to end the match in a disqualification, which was kind of weird because the babyfaces, the New Day, ended the match on heel-like terms, which was kind of came to me as odd, but that's neither here nor there. From that, we ended up going to the U.S. Championship match, which involved Roman Reigns and Rusev. This match kind of didn't start at all. You had Rusev and Roman Reigns actually engaging in this pre-ring assault. There's a lot of spots outside to the barricades and a lot of spots up to the metal stair steps. But what really struck me as odd is that this match didn't even have not any build up, but coming into the ring, nothing came of it. These guys simply didn't even go to the ring at all. There was no DQ to begin with after this match started because this match didn't start at all. These guys didn't even get into the ring. So then we end with the main event, Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton, and that in itself didn't end on terms that any fan would like on any end. Randy Orton fans, Brock Lesnar fans, sure, some pro UFC, pro WWE Brock Lesnar fans would appreciate it, but still, this kind of leads this to be a squash rivalry. It really didn't do anything for these guys. It kind of left them both stagnant. It doesn't build or diminish Randy Orton's name, and nor does it build or diminish Brock Lesnar's name. Another issue that I had with the SummerSlam 2016 is that this card was really off of this match card wasn't really stacked accordingly. You had some titles being waged. You had some titles being battled for on the lower end of the card, and then you had the WWE World Heavyweight title being battled out in the middle of the card, and then there was 4 matches after that. In my opinion, you don't do that to the higher end titles. You simply don't do that. In traditional booking, the more higher appealing matches are going to be on the higher end of the card on the later part of the show. That's just simple and plain. I still don't know what WWE is trying to do in this situation, but still, we're now dealing with the fact of after the AJ Styles and John Cena 4 to 5 star match, after that, this SummerSlam 2016 kind of went into a downward spiral. It's unfortunate too because this match card was pretty stacked. From what we had, as far as the Finn Balor and Seth Rollins fiasco, Finn Balor's injury, I kind of don't want to blame Seth Rollins But I've had a ton to say. I've had a ton to say about this situation. There's several stars that have been injured while wrestling with the Architect Seth Rollins. You had John Cena breaking his nose on Raw. You had Sting ending his career after his match with Seth Rollins at Night of Champions, and then now you have Finn Balor separating his shoulder, popping it back in at SummerSlam, and then ended up tearing his labrum after during the match, taking himself out 4 to 6 weeks. Not taking himself out, but Seth Rollins took Finn Balor out 4 to 6 months. Excuse me. Earlier reports with Bret Hart chiming in saying that Seth Rollins is dangerous to work with is kind of showing truth, because it kind of does show that Seth Rollins is kind of hard to work with. But I kind of want to debunk that myth, because I personally don't think Seth Rollins is really reckless. I think he's a relatively safe wrestler. But I do believe that his moveset is the thing that people need to watch out for. I think he has to learn that the turnbuckle powerbomb isn't going to be a move that you need to use all the time. If he eliminated a few moves out of his moveset, then I personally think that he'll be okay. I enjoyed the match between Seth Rollins and Finn Balor, but it sucks seeing a match. Very unfortunate to see a match that has zero effect the next Monday Night Raw. And what I mean by that is that you see these two gentlemen wrestle, and then you see a great match. But then after that, this match is all in vain, because now Finn Balor, the guy who won the match, has to relinquish the title on Monday Night Raw. This, looking back at this match in 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're going to be like, wow, this is a great match. How long did Finn Balor hold this? And then you have to explain to people, well, Finn Balor got injured that night. You could see it right here. It kind of takes all the momentum out of the match. It kind of takes all the steam out of the match being great, because it has that lasting appeal, that lasting negative appeal that Seth Rollins kind of went a little excessive with the turnbuckle powerbomb on the outside part of the barricade. I have a feeling that they'll save Finn for Royal Rumble season due to this injury, and by that time, I think he'll be the Royal Rumble winner, win the strap back at WrestleMania, and then boom. That's pretty much it. But back onto the subject of Seth Rollins, is that due to his work rate, Seth Rollins works a lot of dates. Every time I went to a house show, Seth Rollins was there working a match. And he definitely, during those couple years, especially the years when he was 2014 and 2015, he was working a lot of dates. So it goes as no surprise to me that, yes, sometimes injuries come along the wayside, but this guy, for the injuries that he's given unintentionally, there has been a lot of matches where he hasn't injured anyone. So you have to take that variable into perspective. The only thing that's unfortunate is that these injuries have been played out on storylines. So it's not like John Cena and Seth Rollins have a match at a house show and then John Cena gets injured, but it goes unsaid because it's at a house show. No, this happened on Raw with him, with Sting at Night of Champions, and then now at Finn Balor at SummerSlam, the most precedented pay-per-view event after WrestleMania. So, like I was mentioning before, this isn't really bad on Finn Balor's part, because now they're just going to save him for roundabout Royal Rumble time, have him come back at WrestleMania. Have him win Royal Rumble, and then have him have his WrestleMania moment next year. That'll be about 6 months' time, kind of around that way. But anyway, I want to go on to this next topic here, discussing this week's SmackDown Raw. SmackDown, to me, has taken the lead as far as the program to watch between the two, because SmackDown is pretty much 2 hours of action-packed wrestling compacted for viewing pleasure. In this respect, SmackDown does put a lot on the table as far as a product goes, because they only have 2 hours time. Raw can take these advantages because they have 3 hours time. So you can have equally the same amount of matches in 2 hours time, but you can have an hour of filler and dialogue and promos being cut during that time. It's like a few matches are stretched along 3 hours time with way too much filler to me when it comes to talking about Raw. But the talent on SmackDown has a lot to work with, especially within 2 hours. So I definitely do appreciate what SmackDown does, especially in only 2 hours on the same network, mind you, as well. Even when it comes to the general managers, the SmackDown and Raw managers have contrasting styles, and with me giving the edge to SmackDown's GMs because simply on Raw's and it's Mick Foley's definitely a pleasure to watch on screen as a GM. I have nothing bad to say about that. I think he is a welcome pleasure to Monday Night Raw because he kind of brings in that Attitude Era aura. He brings in a lot more mystique because he kind of can chime in on past storylines about what he's done. It just brings a lot of acclaim to him. Brings a lot of acclaim for him putting over talent by saying, "Yo, I definitely do appreciate your work." There's tons of opportunities for him to put over talent when he discusses them, etc., etc. But with Stephanie McMahon, her face gimmick or face heel gimmick right now she's doing doesn't really do it. She works better as a heel. The best time she was working around this time 2 years ago was with the Authority angle. I mean, that's the really hit what her and Triple H all had. So, it kind of strikes me as odd to see that Stephanie McMahon's kind of working as a face heel type of scenario. So they need to actually bring some closure to whatever she's doing on that end. But in regards to SmackDown, I think Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon are both peas in the same pod, unlike Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon. They want to put on a great product, and it seems to me that they both put out the same outlook. Actually, both of them really want the same thing for SmackDown. Both of them have the same vision. They both want SmackDown to be better than Raw, and they know that they only have 2 hours of time. So with, the assistance of creative and, they want to make sure that they're bringing out a good product. These two gentlemen, Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon, both have this type of energy that makes you want to watch them on screen. Both of them still have the capability to take bumps. Unlike Mick Foley and Stephanie, both of them cannot take bumps. Mick Foley is one bump away from just immediately just never coming on WWE television again. And Stephanie McMahon can take a bump only from a WWE diva, I would assume. We're not in the era nowadays for you to take bumps from guys as a woman taking bumps from men. But besides that, let's talk about the main thing here is that with SmackDown and Raw, now you have a competition. And that's good because Raw for a long time was just the flagship show. Hell, I mean, SmackDown was once on the Sci-Fi Network. Now it's on the same network as Monday Night Raw is. So that means there's a lot more exposure. It being on 2 consecutive days means that there's a lot more tailgating as far as the previous show goes. There's going to be a lot more people watching SmackDown a lot more because it's the next day of Monday Night Raw. There's a lot more superstars that people would prefer to see on SmackDown than Monday Night Raw. Those factors definitely do come into play. I really do see that that Monday Night Raw is kind of losing this competition between SmackDown. And what we need to see is that the obvious rivalry between the two would bump both products up. And I like that. I like a healthy rivalry. It makes everyone a little bit better. Your best games as a sports athlete has always been against the same competition. No one likes seeing a blowout nowadays in terms of any sporting event. They like close, clear-cut competitions. So I hope the best for Monday Night Raw, but right now SmackDown is really taking the lead. And they really kicked it into overdrive because The Miz probably has cut the best promo since Stone Cold's Austin 3:16 promo at King of the Ring. It definitely rivals the best promo of all time, in my opinion, which is being CM Punk's pipe bomb on Monday Night Raw. The Miz, if you guys do not know, was on the later part of Talking Smack, which is on the WWE Network. And he basically came into this work between Daniel Bryan and him, talking about how Daniel Bryan actually doesn't prefer the Miz's style. This actually came about because the Miz actually said, "Hey man, I saw that you put the new tag team titles on display, and I saw that you put the new women's title on display. But what about the Intercontinental title? This title is a more prestigious title than all the titles in WWE. The Intercontinental title has a lot of superstars behind it, including yourself. You were the last one This was the last title you held." The Miz talking to Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan then came out and said, "Well, the only reason why is because I really don't like you as a wrestler." People can discuss whether this was a work or this was a shoot, but then he goes on to say that his style really makes him... he just basically called him a soft wrestler. The Miz came back and fired back and said, "You know what, dude? I've worked that style for over 10 years, and I've never once been injured. You, on the other hand, can't wrestle anymore because of the style you've done." As many of you guys know, Daniel Bryan's indie style was very intense. It was a mixture of strong style and technical grappling, and a lot of high flying maneuvers. It's very incredible the stuff he's done. But to go on to what he was saying is that Daniel Bryan's career was shortened because of the excessive style that he's done. And that's the mistake a lot of independent guys do when they come on to the Monday Night Raw scene, they come onto the SmackDown scene, is that they bring that same independent style intensity, but they have to work, almost 15 dates every month, almost half the calendar month. If they're a on-demand star, if they're a workhorse, they're going to work 15 to 20. Independent guys probably only work Friday and Saturdays, so that's 8 days compared to 15. You practically doubled your output, and that's double of the same moves that you're doing on a weekend basis. So anyway, back to basically bring my point to a close is that Daniel Bryan's style is very intense, and a lot of independent guys do not know when to tone it down. Hence, Sami Zayn getting injured with his shoulder, and getting, selling his ankle injury this week on SmackDown. Seth Rollins with injuring several other superstars. Finn Balor injuring his ankle with his coup de grace finisher. A lot of factors go into that. I can go on and discuss about it, but you do get the point. The Miz then says, "You know what? I haven't been injured in over 10 years. I haven't been injured at all since I started here in WWE. If you really loved wrestling, like you say you do," and then Daniel Bryan replied as yes, he does. He told him, he's like, "Why don't you quit WWE and go back to those bingo halls and wrestle with your indie stars?" Telling him that, "You know what, dude? You're putting on a front. Because if you really wanted to quit WWE and go to wrestle in the indies, you wouldn't. Because the paycheck you're getting here in the WWE to not wrestle is actually a lot better." Which is, self-explanatory. The Miz then went on and pretty much got really intense, got really red, and started discussing that he's no coward. Daniel Bryan called him a coward, and he's like, "I'm not a coward, dude. The person that's a coward is the one that says he's going to return 1 year's time," talking to Daniel Bryan, "and then doesn't come back. Doesn't come back for the fans. That's a coward." So then I think at this point, this is starting to become a shoot, and then because it frustrates Daniel Bryan to the point where he leaves. And then the Miz just goes on this epic promo, just talking about him not being a coward, how he enjoys being in the eyes of the WWE, and then he gets really frustrated, holds the belt, and says, "Get that camera over here." Talks to the cameraman to point the camera right at his face at a direct perspective, and says, "This is day 141 of Miz's never-ending Intercontinental World Tour." And for me, that whole segment, which lasted about 4 minutes long, was incredible. My jaw was open from the time that you see the Miz actually get into reality. The Miz, what he needs to do after this promo, he needs to make sure to capitalize on this momentum. I'm sure it'll happen since he's still the Intercontinental Champion, but he needs to make sure to capitalize on that momentum. Definitely, he does. I'm talking about maybe a program with an A-list roster wrestler. They need to make this title relevant. With that kind of promo, you need to capitalize on that because a lot of people that don't watch SmackDown are going to be watching SmackDown next Tuesday, and they want to see what The Miz is going to do. They want to see that. And I can really promise you that Day 141 promo is going to be rewatched as many times as the Pipe Bomb and Austin's 316 promo in the past couple weeks. The Pipe Bomb wasn't introduced to social media in time, but still being rewatched today. The Austin 316 promo, same situation. The Miz cut the right promo at the right time, and that's awesome. And that's what I can appreciate from The Miz. I actually, for a long time, never appreciated The Miz, but damn, homeboy cut a really good promo. Very impressive. Anyway, guys, I want to close off this pay-per-view wrestling podcast by letting you guys know this pay-per-view wrestling podcast was brought to you by none other than my proud sponsor, Game Swappers. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade your retro games and next-gen consoles. That's PS4 and Xbox One. You can come into contact with Game Swappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS on Instagram. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade. Keep in mind, guys, that if you do share this podcast, you'll be able to get 10% off towards your retro game purchases at Game Swappers. Simply share, take a screenshot, and then show the Game Swappers on their Instagram page or show them in the store, and you'll be able to get 10% off towards your retro game purchases. Or if you do have stuff like retro games to trade, simply do the same thing, but make sure to bring those retro games in the store or try to contact him to handle it via direct message on Instagram. Once again, guys, I'm Mark Flores. You can catch me on Instagram at MarkFsModernLife, all one word, MarkFsModernLife, MarkFsModernLife. You can also catch me on Twitter to talk about wrestling, whatever have you, at MarkFsPodcast. Make sure to tune in Friday. We're going on the Mark and Andre show live at 9 p.m. We're going to be discussing the Mandela effect and the summer blockbuster bombs and what Hollywood can do to prevent themselves from doing that ever again. A foolproof method, I think. Anyway, you guys have a good night. This has been the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast.